Get yourself a job or get yourself into a home. Those are your two options. That's what my daughter said to me, standing in her own kitchen with her arms folded, and I didn't say one word back. I set my coffee mug down on the counter, walked into the basement room they'd given me, and started folding shirts into the same canvas duffel I'd carried out of my mother's house 50 years before. "Dad, where do you think you're going?" she called after me when she heard the zipper. I kept folding, and just about then a clean silver sedan eased up to the curb out front, and a woman with steady eyes and grey hair pinned back stepped out to come and get me. And the look on my daughter's face in that doorway is a thing I will carry with me until the day they put me in the ground. If this story gets up under your skin the way it got up under mine, do an old man a favor and subscribe to Ivory Vengeance. Every week I sit down and tell you a true one about regular people who got pushed past the line and finally found the nerve to push back. And tell me in the comments what town you're listening from tonight. I read every single one. My name's Ellis. I'm 68 years old. I spent 41 years on the floor of a tool and die shop outside Akron, Ohio, the kind of place that smelled like cutting oil and burnt coffee and made parts you've touched 100 times without ever knowing it. I started there at 22 with a high school diploma and a steady hand, and I retired at 63 a shift foreman with a bad shoulder and a pension that wasn't much, but was mine. I married Joanne when I was 24. She was a secretary at Lincoln Elementary for 30 years, the kind of woman who knew every kid's name and every parent's situation and never once let on. We had one daughter, one. We doted on that girl like the sun came up just to shine on her. Joanne died 2 years ago this spring. A stroke, in the kitchen on a Tuesday morning while I was out front putting salt down on the steps. By the time I came back in with my boots still on, she was already gone from me, sitting in her chair with the church bulletin in her lap. 44 years married, and I didn't even get to say goodbye. People tell you grief comes in waves. Nobody tells you the waves don't stop. They just get further apart. And then one comes out of nowhere on a Sunday afternoon and knocks you flat. The house got too quiet after that. Too big, too. Her reading glasses were still on the windowsill. Her coat still hung by the back door, and I couldn't bring myself to move it. So when my daughter sat me down maybe 6 months after the funeral and said, "Dad, you shouldn't be rattling around in that old place by self. Sell it. Come live with us. Family takes care of family," I cried right there at her kitchen table. I thought it was the kindest thing anybody had said to me in months. I thought I was being rescued. Here's where I made the mistake that I'll regret as long as I'm breathing. I sold the house. Got $240,000 for it after the mortgage was settled, which around our way is a lot of money. That house took 30 years to pay off, $1 at a time. And my son-in-law, he's an operations manager over at a distribution center, the kind of fellow who's always got a spreadsheet and a plan. He sat me down and explained how it would all work. They'd finish out a suite in the basement, real nice, a place that'd be mine, my own bathroom, a little sitting area, my recliner. All I had to do was put in toward the build, so I wrote them a check for $90,000 to get it started. I figured what's mine is theirs anyway. It all goes to them in the end. The rest of that money, and I want you to hear this part because it matters later. The rest of it I left right where it was, in my own accounts at the credit union I'd banked at my whole working life. Some in savings, some in a couple of CDs Joanne and I had set up years back. I didn't make a show of it. I didn't lie about it. I just never brought it up, and nobody ever asked. A man who's worked a factory floor for 4 decades learns to keep a little something tucked away for the lean stretch. Old habit. Thank God for it. The suite they built me was a room in the back corner of the basement next to the water heater. Concrete floor with a rug thrown over it, one little window up high at ground level that looked out at the side of the neighbor's fence. A twin bed, a dresser, and yes, my recliner, jammed in so tight I could barely get the footrest up. The bathroom they'd promised turned into a half bath with no shower, so I had to go upstairs to wash. The $90,000, near as I could ever tell, went into a new kitchen with a marble island and a deck out back with one of those built-in grills. I never said a word about it. I told myself I was being a sour old man. I told myself I should be grateful. The first few weeks weren't bad. The grandkids were happy to see me. My grandson, he's 10, he'd come down and we'd build models, little balsa airplanes, the kind I used to make with his mother when she was small. My granddaughter, she's 7, she'd curl up next to me in the recliner, and I'd read to her. For a little while there, I let myself believe I'd done the right thing. But it turned the way these things do, so slow you don't see it happening until you're already in it. It started with the rules. My daughter never sat me down and laid them out plain. She'd just float them past me, soft little comments that sounded like suggestions, but landed like orders. Dad, maybe don't run the dryer during the day. The electric bill's been brutal. Dad, the kids have homework after dinner, so the living room TV's kind of off limits in the evenings. Dad, if you're going to make coffee, can you just make the one pot in the morning? It adds up. I started measuring everything. How much water I used, how long I stood in the upstairs shower, how much space I took up at the supper table. I learned which stairs creaked and how to step around them. I learned to come and go like a draft under the door, there but not there. Then came the matter of the money. About 4 months in, my son-in-law called what he called a family meeting at the kitchen table after the kids were in bed. He had a folder, an actual manila folder, and he walked me through what it cost to carry me. The food, the utilities, the gas to drive me to the VA clinic and the credit union, all of it laid out in his neat little columns. "We're not trying to make you feel bad, Ellis," he said. "We just think it's only fair you contribute. You've got your Social Security. You've got the pension." And I did. I get about $1,500 a month from Social Security and another $600 or so from the shop's pension. $2,100, give or take. So I started signing it over. Every month, the day those checks cleared, I'd hand my daughter the cash, and she'd take it without much more than a nod. $2,100 a month, to sleep next to a water heater and be told not to run the dryer. I want to tell you something I figured out too late, and I want you younger folks listening to write it down somewhere. Do not ever sign away the things that are supposed to carry you through your last years. Not your house, not your pension, not your name on a piece of paper. The day you hand somebody else the keys to your old age, you are no longer a father or a grandfather. You're a line item in a folder. I learned that at a marble kitchen island I paid for myself. The grandkids changed too, and that's the part that put the real cracks in me. Kids learn what they live. They watched the way their parents looked at me, the long sighs, the rolled eyes, and they started doing it too. My grandson stopped coming down to build planes. When I'd ask, he'd say his mom told him I needed my rest. My granddaughter, my little buddy, the one who used to fall asleep against my arm. One afternoon I came around the corner in the kitchen and held my arms out for a hug like always, and she stepped back from me. Just a small step. "I'm not supposed to," she said, looking at the floor. And my daughter, standing right there at that island, didn't correct her, didn't say a thing, just kept scrolling her phone. I went down to that basement room and I sat in my recliner in the dark for a long time. I had a photo of Joanne on the dresser, one from a church picnic, her laughing with her hand up to her mouth. I picked it up and I said, out loud like a fool, "What do I do, Joe? Tell me what to do." She didn't answer. She just laughed at me from that little frame, the way she always did, like she knew something I didn't, and maybe she did. I started getting out of that house. I'd leave at 8 in the morning, right after the kids went to school, and I wouldn't come back till near supper. My daughter was glad of it. "Good for you to get out, Dad," she'd say. But what she meant was good for them. The house breathed easier without me sucking up the air. I found the public library on Maple Street, an old Carnegie building with stone steps and tall windows, the kind of quiet that didn't cost anything and didn't ask anything of me. I'd take a Louis L'Amour off the shelf, or sometimes a fat history of the war, and I'd sit at one of the long oak tables in the back and just be a man reading a book. Nobody there knew I slept by a water heater. Nobody there sighed when I walked in. That's where I met her, Marion. It was a Wednesday. I was sitting with a book about the men who built the Hoover Dam, not really reading it, just hiding behind it. And a voice next to me said, "My father worked that dam. Hardest 2 years of his life," he used to say. I looked up, and there was a woman about my age, maybe a few years younger, grey hair pinned up nice, a navy cardigan, glasses on a little chain, kind eyes, steady. She ran the Thursday book club and read to the kindergartners on Tuesdays. And she'd seen me there 4 days running, and figured I looked like a fellow who could use somebody to talk to. She was a widow too. Her husband had run a heating and cooling business in town for 30 years. A good man by her telling. Gone 3 years now from cancer. She had a paid-off house over on the east side, comfortable but not flashy, and a clean Buick she kept washed. 2 kids, grown, one out in Denver, one down in the Carolinas. They call on Sundays, she said, when they remember it's Sunday. We were 2 of a kind, her and me. 2 people who'd done everything right for 40 years and ended up alone on the far side of it, wondering what it had all been for. We started meeting there most days by the back tables. We talked about everything and nothing. The war, our spouses, the Browns, and how they always found a new way to break your heart, our kids, the towns we grew up in. She never once asked me why a grown man spent 8 hours a day at a public library, and I never told her about the basement or the folder or the $2,100 a month. But I think she knew. Women like Marion, they see things. Because one afternoon, over 2 cups of bad coffee in the little cafe off the library lobby, she set her cup down and looked right at me and said, "Ellis, I don't know your whole story, but I know a man who's been made to feel like he's in the way. And I'm telling you, you deserve a lot better than a folding chair at the edge of your own family's table." I came apart right there, a 68-year-old man crying into a paper cup at a library cafe. First time anybody had looked at me, really looked at me, in 2 years, and seen a person worth something, and not a burden to be managed. She didn't make a fuss. She just put her hand over mine and let me get through it. The night everything broke came on a Thursday. It had been one of those rare good days. I'd spent the whole afternoon with Marion. She'd brought sandwiches from the deli, and we ate them on a bench by the river behind the library, watching the water go by, and for a few hours I'd felt like a man again. I came home a little later than usual, maybe 6:30, and I knew the second I came through the door I'd made a mistake. They were sitting in the kitchen, the 2 of them, with that look I'd come to know, the look of people who'd already talked it all over without me. My daughter started in. She'd had a long day, the bills were piling up, the truck payment, the property taxes. And then she said the thing that I think she'd been building toward for a long time. "You can't just keep doing this, Dad. Going to the library all day like you're on some kind of permanent vacation, while we work ourselves into the ground. Do you have any idea what it costs to keep you here? $2,100 doesn't go as far as you think." And something in me, after 8 months of measuring my own breathing, something finally stood up. I looked at my son-in-law, who was sitting there with his arms crossed, and I said, "You added it all up once. The food, the lights, the gas. You put it in a folder. Tell me something. Did you ever once add up what I put into this kitchen we're standing in? The $90,000. Did that go in a column anywhere?" The room went dead quiet. My daughter's face went hard. And then she said the 6 words I will hear in my head for the rest of my life. She said, "Get yourself a job or get yourself into a home. Those are your 2 options. Get a job." At 68, with a shoulder I can barely lift over my head, the daughter I raised, the one I carried on my shoulders to see the 4th of July fireworks, the one I sat up with every night she had croup, telling me to go get a job or check myself into a home like a piece of furniture put out by the curb. I didn't yell, I didn't argue. "I'd done my arguing," said my one piece, and I had nothing left to say to a person who could look at her own father and say a thing like that. I just walked downstairs and I packed my duffel, and when she heard the zipper and called down, "Dad, where do you think you're going?" I didn't answer her either. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the night before, sitting in my recliner, I'd done a thing I should have done months earlier. I'd called Marion, and I'd finally told her all of it. The basement, the folder, the little girl stepping back from my arms, and Marion had said in that steady voice of hers, "Ellis, you call me when you've had enough. Day or night, I'll come get you." So when I zipped that bag, I sent her one text, 3 words: "I've had enough." And by the time I climbed those basement stairs for the last time, her silver Buick was already idling at the curb. I walked out the front door with my duffel over my good shoulder. My daughter came out onto the porch in her socks. My son-in-law stood behind her in the doorway, and they watched a woman they'd never seen before get out of a clean car, walk around, and open the passenger door for me like I was somebody worth the trouble. Marion didn't say a word to them. She just looked at my daughter for one long second, the kind of look that says everything, and then she got back in and we drove off, and I did not look back. Not once. That was 3 months ago. I live at Marion's now. We're not rushing anything. We're too old to rush and too old to wait, both at the same time. I have a real room with real windows that get the morning sun. We have coffee on her back patio when the weather's decent, 2 pots if we feel like it, and nobody says a word about the electric bill. I fixed her gutters and rehung a screen door that had been sticking for 2 years, and she made me a pot roast that tasted like Sundays used to taste. We go to the library still, together now in the Buick, not because either of us needs a place to hide, but because we like it there. It's where we started. And here's the part the story's really about, the part I think you came to hear. About 6 weeks after I left, I got a call from an old buddy of mine, fellow named Sal, who lives 2 streets over from my daughter and still waves to me at the hardware store. He says, "Ellis, you hear they had the truck repossessed?" I about dropped the phone. Turns out that big shiny truck my son-in-law leased, the one with the payment my daughter was always complaining about. They'd been covering it, in part, with my $2,100 a month. The month I stopped handing over those checks, the math stopped working. The truck went first. Then I heard the Florida trip they'd planned for spring break got cancelled. Then Sal told me my daughter had been picking up extra shifts. That miserable $2,100 a month, the money my own daughter said didn't go as far as I thought. Turned out it went exactly as far as it needed to keep their whole high life from caving in. They only found out what it was worth the day it stopped coming. They didn't lose a freeloader. They lost the foundation under their feet, and they'd been too busy looking down on the man holding it up to ever notice. 2 weeks ago, my daughter came to Marion's house. Marion saw her through the front window and let me decide. I told her to send her in. My daughter sat on the edge of the couch like she wasn't sure she was allowed to be there, and Marion, bless her, brought us coffee and then made herself scarce. My daughter's eyes were red. She'd been crying in the car. "Dad," she said, "I came to say I'm sorry. In person, not over the phone." She looked around at the house, the windows, the warm rooms. "You're living better than us now," she said, and her voice broke on it. "It's not about living better," I told her. "It's about being looked at like a person." And then she cried, the real kind, the kind that comes up from somewhere a person can't fake. "I failed you," she said. "I let him put you in that basement, and I let the kids treat you like. I don't even know what we let you become." I sat with that a minute, and then I told her the truth, the whole of it. "Yes," I said, "you failed me, about as bad as a child can fail a parent. But I failed you too. I gave you everything you ever pointed at, and I never once taught you what it cost. I made you soft, and I made you think the people who give to you are people you can step on. So we both built this, and now we both get to live in it." She asked me before she left if she could come around again sometime, if she could bring the kids. And here's what I told her, and I meant every word. I said yes, but on one condition, that she comes because she wants to see her father, not because the money dried up and she's sniffing around for a way back to the well, and that she never, ever asks me for a dime, because I've got a little put away, more than she ever knew, and not one penny of it is going to a household that put me by the water heater. I forgave my daughter that afternoon. I want to be clear about that, but forgiving somebody isn't the same as forgetting, and it sure isn't the same as handing them the knife again. After she drove off, Marion came and sat next to me and took my hand. "You all right?" she asked, and I told her the honest answer. I forgave her because I needed to, for me, so I'm not carrying it around like a sack of rocks the rest of the way. But the wound's still there. Every time I look at her, I'm going to hear those 6 words. That doesn't just wash out. And Marion nodded, because she's a woman who knows that forgiveness doesn't erase the pain. It just sets down the part of it that was poisoning you and lets you walk on lighter. I'm 68 years old, and I've started my whole life over from the basement up. I've got a woman who reads to kindergartners and laughs at my bad jokes and makes a pot roast worth living for. I've got mornings with the sun in them. I've got my pension and my social security going into my own account where they belong, and a little nest egg nobody's going to talk me out of ever again. I look at the grandkids' school picture my daughter mailed me, and I hope someday they're old enough to come around on their own and I can teach my grandson to build a balsa plane again. We'll see. Some things you have to let time decide. People in this town look at Marion and me, walking into the library or sitting on her patio, and you can see them wondering what our story is. Let them wonder. I spent 2 years being made to feel like I was the extra chair at my own family's table, and I'm done apologizing for taking up space on this earth. So let me leave you with the only thing I really know for sure. After 68 years and 41 of them on a factory floor, the best way to get back at the people who treated you like you were nothing. It isn't hollering, and it isn't a lawyer, and it isn't lying awake at night planning their comeuppance. The best revenge is waking up happy. It's having your coffee with somebody who's glad you're there. It's sleeping through the night without bracing for the next sigh. It's living the rest of your days with your back straight and your name still on your own checks. My daughter took 8 months of my life, and she told me to get a job or get out. So I got out, and every time she sees me getting along just fine without her, every time word reaches her that the old man's doing better than he ever did under her roof, she's going to understand exactly what she threw away. She didn't lose a burden. She lost her father, and that's a bill that's going to come due for the rest of her life. Now let me ask you something. You who stuck with me all the way to the end, has somebody you'd have died for ever made you feel like you were in the way? Did you swallow it and stay quiet, or did you finally find the nerve to pack the bag and walk out the door? Tell me down in the comments, because your story matters too, and because somewhere out there is another old soul sitting in a basement tonight who needs to hear that it's never, not ever, too late to walk out into the sun. Thank you for staying with me. I'll see you in the next one.